Everyone, it's Christian B. Burnaby, Vancouver-based real estate agent. Welcome to another edition of Rapid Fire Real Estate, where today I want to take you through 4 topics, and you can take that intel with you out into the marketplace. And as always, if you find this helpful, give us a thumbs up, leave us some comments below. And if you need to reach out, you need further assistance, you can find me by my contact in the show notes just below. Okay, guys, for today, we've got 4 topics here. Very important if you're a landlord that you hang around here for about 5 minutes, because a lot of this can affect your bank account. And I'm going to give you the quick lay of the land. 4 topics. I want to talk about CRA sending out notices to landlords who have been short-term renting their properties. Second, there was one landlord was penalized $82,000 by an arbitrator for evicting their tenant. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this. Third, why do we have so many mortgage brokers in Canada? Why do we not see so many brokers down in the United States? And what's the difference with that? And finally, I'm just going to share with you a little bit of realtor wisdom here on pricing and why I don't think we're going to see a price decline, but perhaps not a price jump either. Okay, so let's start with number 1. Interesting discussion the other day. I was hosting an open house and I bumped into a long-term agent. And she told us she got a very interesting notice in the mail from CRA. That's the Canada Revenue Agency. And what the notice says is that, dear owner, we see that you have been renting your property on a short-term websites like Vrbo or Airbnb. And we just want you to know, dear owner, that you may lose the capital gains, principal residence capital gains exemption. That's an important point. Remember, in Canada, the only bone the Canadian taxman throws you is your principal residence capital gains exemption. In other words, you buy the property for $1 million, you sell it for $2 million 20 years later, that $1 million is in your pocket. You get to keep it. And what they're saying now, CRA is saying that if you're renting your property on a short-term basis, we deem the property to be commercial, just like a hotel. And you could lose the right to basically keep all the proceeds from the sale. And there was a tax court ruling about this about a year ago that said that a 13% tax could be applied. So just imagine, you have that couple, they bought it for $1 million, 20 years later sold it for $2 million, but for 2 years, towards the end of that stint, they decided to do some short-term rental of the basement suite downstairs. And imagine they go to sell it for $2 million, and all of a sudden they're hit with a 13% tax. That's $250,000. That's a hell of a lot of money. And so it's very important, if you are going to go anywhere near Airbnb or short-term rentals, that you talk to your accountant about the tax implications to you. There's a lot changing and there's a lot happening right now at CRA with regards to this. And believe me, the taxman is looking for every reason to get more money from you. They have to. If you look at the budget deficit the federal government is running, as well as our provincial government here in BC, and they're just about to blow a hole in the budget here by another $1.8 billion because the gas tax revenue is going to come off on April the 1st. The carbon tax revenue. So they need money. And this is going to be another way they're going to come and get it from you. So talk to your accountant if you are doing short-term rental or planning to. Okay, second topic today is the landlord fined $82,000 by an arbitrator. So the arbitrator awarded a tenant $82,000 because they said that the tenant was unfairly evicted. And what happened here was the landlord claims that they moved into the coach house in the back. They were renovating the front, and eventually they moved in. And the tenant claims, not so fast. The tenant says they came back to the property and they observed that the gates were locked, the garbage bins hadn't been moved in weeks or months, and in fact, 5 to 6 months later, the tenant noticed that the landlord had applied for a license, a short-term license with the city of Vancouver. So this goes to the arbitrator, the residential tenancy tribunal, and the arbitrator awarded the tenant 12 months rent. Landlords, if you wrongly evict your tenant, you could be facing whatever their rent would be for the whole year. That's your penalty. Now, this tenant was paying almost $7,000 a month in rent. So this is not a poor tenant by any means. Makes you wonder why they're not buying their own place. Nevertheless, 7,000 times 12 months, and you get to about you get to 84. But in this case, it was a little less than that. So $82,000 was the yearly rent, and that was awarded to the tenant. Now, the judge here at a higher court has pushed this case back to the tribunal because they found there were some procedural anomalies with it. And in essence, the judge, I think, here was saying, look, you guys restricted this to a 1-hour hearing, but this is an $82,000 decision. This deserves a little bit more due process. And the criticism in the article of the arbitrator is that they did not listen to the landlord's witness. That person was not part of the call. In any event, I think what this really highlights is that it is really tough to be a landlord right now. You are walking a fine line, and if you get a bad tenant, good luck evicting them. Worse still, if you are in a situation where you are paying, your mortgage has gone up, everything else has gone up, your insurance, your strata fees, and you are subsidizing the unit at levels that are just not affordable to you, you've got several options. One, sell the unit. You can just sell the property. There's no reason why you have to continue subsidizing the unit. Hopefully somebody who is going... The most likely scenario is that someone's going to buy it and move into the property, an end user. And that person, in that process, the tenant has to leave. The second thing you could do here is negotiate a mutual agreement to end the tenancy, but you may have to provide an incentive to the tenant. The tenant doesn't have to leave legally. However, if you use the mutual agreement to end tenancy form, which you can just find on the RTB's website, then it's all kosher. It's all fair, right? But you may have to throw them a bone. And the third thing is you move in. Move in. But if you're going to move in, you've got to move in for at least 12 months. That's my understanding. Now, the article here said 6 months only, but I believe they've changed that. Unless I'm mistaken. So it's either 6 months or 12 months, but you really have to move in. That's called moving in good faith. And tenants are not stupid. They're going to come back like this guy did. I Googled this person's name. It looks like at some point in the past, he was a corporate lawyer. He's not going to be dumb, okay? If you've evicted someone like this in bad faith, he's going to get you. And I've talked to a lot of tenants, a few of them who've called me and have said, how can I find out where the owner lives? So they're on to you. Be careful. It may just be better if you're losing money hand over fist. It's probably just better to sell the property, guys. Okay. Third topic here I want to talk about is mortgage brokers. I had a discussion here at a wine tasting event the other day, and I was talking to a fellow runner of mine who says in the United States there's no mortgage brokers, and Canada is full of mortgage brokers, and it's because the lending practices here are very suspect. In other words, that the banks and brokers are lending to people who don't have money and can't afford to be buying what they're buying. So I thought that was a curious position to take. So I did a little bit of digging, did some research, and that's actually not true. The United States does have a lot of mortgage brokers, but Canada has more. The reason why we have more in Canada is that about 75 to 80% of all mortgages go through the 6 big banks, right? RBC, TD, CIBC, Scotia, BMO, and National Bank based out of Quebec. And those banks want your business. If the banks might pay a mortgage broker $10,000 or $20,000 commission to bring on board $1 million mortgage, a $2 million mortgage. Think about the interest payments the bank collects there. I mean, it is well worth the bank's time and money to pay as many brokers as possible a commission of $10,000 or $20,000 to bring millions of dollars of mortgages to their balance sheet, right? They're collecting interest payments, and at that point, it's set and forget for those guys. So that's why we have more mortgage brokers here in Canada. A couple of the reasons would be that lending practices in the United States are more diversified. So in the US, there's a lot of non-bank lenders, more credit unions, there's more online lenders, there's more fintech lenders. And because of in Canada, I don't see those types of options. And so in the United States, a lot of Americans will go directly to the lender, whereas here Canadians go to a mortgage broker who then goes to the lender on their behalf. I hope that makes sense, okay? Now, and the third reason is actually in the United States, regulation and licensing for mortgage brokers is more onerous. It's higher and harder than it is here in Canada. Part of that may be due to the 2008-9 financial crisis, which was blamed on mortgage brokers and suspect lending practices. So a lot of brokers were, giving out these what they called ninja loans, right? No income, no job, and were basically filling their pockets with commissions. And so lending practices have gotten a lot tighter there. And that explains why there's less mortgage brokers in the US and more in Canada. All right. And it has nothing to do with the Canadian banks lending to buyers who have suspect who can't afford what they're buying. It's actually, in fact, in terms of mortgage and financing requirements, it's a lot harder to get a mortgage in Canada. For example, in Canada, you have to show your income and where are you getting your money from. Whereas in the United States, there's still a lot easier going about that, let's say. Okay, final topic, a little bit of realtor wisdom for you for this Tuesday, and that is where price is going to go. It's a great question, right? It's on the mind of buyers, on the mind of sellers. Buyers want a cheaper home. Sellers want to get more. Here's what I think. I don't think we're going to see too much of a difference over the next 6 to 12 months. I still think activity levels are pretty slow, especially with all the uncertainty around tariff talk. Buyers often will just step to the sidelines, and they don't need to buy. And sellers don't need to sell. They can wait it out, especially if they've locked in a low mortgage rate, and they can probably sit on that for a year or two. And so who's really losing money here might be other realtors, at least and I get it. I get the irony. I don't expect anybody to feel sorry for the real estate agents out there. But there is some truth to that, because when I look at the number of real estate agents licensed with the Greater Vancouver Real Estate Board, I can see it's actually dropped by several hundred from its highs 5 years ago. It's interesting because our population has grown by several 100,000, but the number of realtors is actually decreasing. I don't mind that personally because I've got a long-term approach here. I'm going to be doing this probably 20 years from now. But at least what I want to share with you is I don't think we're going to see an appreciable gain in price or decline in price in the next 6 months anyway. Okay, folks, if you got comments, questions, please leave them below, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining me.